We'd like to be able to go into our first panel, and we'd like to be able to call up D'Angelo. I'm going to butcher your last name, and I apologize. It's Cortillo? Cortillo, I apologize. Mr. Cortillo, along with Tisha Ortiz. Mr. Cortillo is from the National Center for Youth Law, along with Ms. Ortiz as well. We're grateful that both of you are here. You have 3 minutes to be able to present. And what we'd like to be able to do, if it works, is we're going to go through all of our presenters, and then obviously any time that the senator has any questions or comments, please feel free to chime in. And we're really excited that the two of you are here today. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. My name is D'Angelo Cortillo. I am a student at Chabot College and the Juvenile Justice Intern at the National Center for Youth Law. Today, I'm able to pursue my goal of becoming an attorney thanks to the support of caring people outside of the system. If I had to rely on the care provided by the state, I would probably still be in jail. My sister and I were removed from my mom's care when I was 2 years old, after my mom attempted suicide. We were placed in a shelter until my grandparents picked me up. For the next 5 years, my grandparents provided us with a stable life. Around that time, I turned 7 or 8. My mother began fighting to get me and my sister back. One day, my mother came to visit and promised to get me a dog and a new bike if I told the CPS worker that my grandparents were abusing me. I did what my mom asked, but after speaking to the worker, I felt guilty and soon after began acting out in school. My grandparents took me to a child crisis center where I was committed at 8 to a mental institution for an evaluation. 2 days later, I was released to my mother and prescribed medication for sleep and ADHD. I was given Depakote and Klonopin when all I needed were the things that any 8-year-old needs to sleep: a nightlight, a stuffed animal, warm milk, or just a bedtime story. I was taken from my mother by CPS shortly after and placed with my father, where I was physically and sexually abused. Then I was placed in a series of foster homes and group homes. I do not remember receiving any treatment besides medication and inconsistent and personal counseling during this time. The follow-up care for the medication was also inconsistent. I never saw any evidence that my doctors and social workers were communicating. I entered foster care with many traumas. I was angry and confused because I felt my mother did not love me and didn't want me. I was constantly trying to hide the feelings that I had towards my father and the family member who had sexually abused me. I did not want to be in a stranger's house. I wanted to be at home. I needed love from my mother and security from my father. When I acted out, the first response of most of my foster parents was to get rid of me. The doctor's response was to medicate me, and the case managers, probation officers, and law enforcement's response was to lock me in a cell until I stabilized my behavior. I was crossed over to the probation system around age 12. Like most of the scared children inside, I acted like a tough guy in order to survive. For the next 9 years, and until recently, I remained in the system. At age 15, I was sent to Vision Quest in Arizona by the San Francisco Probation Department. At the time, they offered equine-assisted therapy, and I greatly benefited from the setting and interaction with animals. After a few months, I was kicked out for a fight, but I believe that my experience there has a big impact on my success today. Though this was not reflected through my actions at the time, I believe that had I received effective therapy like this when I first became involved with state care, I might have avoided many of the difficulties I experienced, and my behavior would not have spiraled out of control. Even more valuable to me has been the support of family, community, and mentors that have come into my life recently. I have stable members of my extended family who I could have been placed with early on if the state system had done its homework. Instead, I was placed with immediate family and into harmful and dangerous institutions. I could have found myself sooner if I had caring role models in my life like my mentor. But instead of any of these things that a normal child needs, I was placed on an inadequately supervised regimen of ever-changing drugs. I'm a living example of what can work. I hope that you will work to change state care so it gives other children what they need instead of powerful drugs to sedate them. Thank you.
Angela, nice work. We're really grateful. I'm going to have you hold. I'm going to have some questions. And thank you so much for telling your personal story as well.
No problem. Thank you.
We're grateful. Please, Tisha.
Hello, my name is Tisha Ortiz. I am 22 years old and a current student at Cal State East Bay. I first entered foster care at the age of 4. and went in and out of the system until age 12. When I stayed in foster care until I turned 18. I went through many traumatic experiences in and out of foster care. I was beaten by my parents from ages 8 to 12. At home, drugs were used around me, and I was even left in a crack house. Things were so bad in 5th grade, I started staying next door with a babysitter, but that was no escape. The babysitter's son raped me repeatedly for over a year. Then the police officer investigating the rape molested me too. I left that situation for another bad one. CPS placed me with my older sister. It wasn't a good experience for me as I was treated differently from the rest of her family and was often made fun of and had things thrown at me. I even got locked up in rooms all day. Living with my sister was traumatic, and I ended up being 5150. My sister abandoned me at the hospital for over a month, making CPS come pick me up. I ended up in a group home. The group home did very little to help me with my issues, and often told me the feelings I was having were wrong, and they didn't allow me to show any of the emotions I felt in response to the abuses that I went through. Near the end of the time with my sister, I began experiencing anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies. These worsened when I went into the group home. I didn't understand what had happened to me, and I was very angry and depressed. All I understood of the rape was what I saw from TV or movies, and I felt like I was a damaged person. I needed mental health services to cope with the rape and other abuses that I had endured, but up to the point, I only received them at the psychiatric hospital at age 14. If I would have received mental health services like therapy when I re-entered the foster care system at age 12, some of the behaviors I was exhibiting, the anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies, wouldn't have been so difficult for me to deal with. Instead, I ended up in a group home where the doctors tried to treat me with various powerful drugs. Each doctor would prescribe me more and more pills to treat my symptoms. Eventually, they had me taking 12 pills a day, 6 in the morning, 6 at night, of 4 different psychotropic medications. I started to self-harm because I wasn't dealing with the traumas I had experienced. It was only at age 17 that I was finally seen by a therapeutic behavioral specialist who helped me to cope without self-harm. A few weeks before turning 18, I was also put in trauma-focused therapy. I had to go every day for 3 weeks. It was a lot to work on in only the 3 weeks I had left in care. I was reliving these abuses too fast, and I was re-traumatized. The foster care system did very little to help me with my mental stability, and the services I received were given to me too late. I should have received the services when I first re-entered care. I should have been placed with more positive adults and families. Instead, the foster system failed me. I came out of the foster care system more messed up and unprepared to get help for myself. It took a few years with a steady therapist that I found and trusted after I aged out before I started to feel better. It wasn't until I found people that actually cared about me and nurtured me to become a better person and continue school that I was able to do better with my life. How much better it would be for other foster children if they could receive the care and nurturing from the moment they first entered the foster care system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Want to see if the senator has any questions?
No, I mean, I may get a question from it. I just wanted to comment and thank you for your testimony. I think it was very courageous and very well done. And I really feel bad for the experiences you got to go through. I guess the question I would have is, seeing how both of you felt that you were over-medicated, was there ever an instance where you told the provider that you didn't want to take the medication anymore at that time? Was that ever the case?
Yes,
And
and
what did
I
they tell
actually
you?
was punished. When I told them I didn't like the side effects they were giving me. I was having difficulty swallowing. I couldn't swallow food. I was I felt like I was a zombie all day. I was basically zoned out all the time, and I told them I didn't like that. I was a smart student, normally got A's and B's. I failed my first period classes because I couldn't stay awake, and when I restarted refusing these medications, they actually locked me up in mental institutions, and when they decided to get me back, they took away all my belongings, stripped me from everything I had. All I had was the clothes on my back, and told me until I started taking these medications again, I could have my belongings back again and have, the right to go outside, the right to talk on the phone, the right to go to school. So I was basically stripped of all rights.
And then, at what level was this? Was this
It
like,
was a level 10 group home.
was this like the physician? Was it the?
It was the staff, and the director of the group home, saying from the doctor that I needed to take these medications.
Now, maybe I can ask other panels or whatever, was there any recourse for you as a patient or as a foster youth for you to complain to anybody? Was there an outlet that you could have done?
I didn't know that I could speak to the foster care ombudsman. I didn't know that I could talk to my lawyer. I wasn't, when these things were happening, I didn't know the things I could go to so it could stop.
Okay, thank you.
I'll say that
Yeah.
I believe that the foster care system, as well as every other state institution or system, has a grievance system in place. However, some of these policies aren't posted within the foster homes, within the group homes, and within the institutions. And then to kind of piggyback off your other question, I had a response to that. It was, imagine, a 12, 13-year-old kid or a 9-year-old kid sitting in a chair with a doctor in a white lab coat standing over him, telling him that there's something wrong with him and that the only way that he could be normal is if he takes these medications. I think indirectly we're intimidated a lot of times into taking medications, and because we don't have the support of family or other stable, people in our lives, we almost by force take these medications. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. I just have two quick questions. So one comment and one question. You're absolutely right in regards to the grievance process. That is an area that we need to be able to focus, and I appreciate the Senator addressing that. Because frankly, youth just aren't aware of their rights. And one, that even a grievance process exists, and number two, if they are, how that works, and to be able to escalate the issue. I'd like to be able to talk about mental health care for a second. If you can both address, you both talked about it in the testimony, but if you can talk about how long were you in the system before mental health care, trauma therapy was offered. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, my first contact with the system was about 2.5. Like I said, when my mother attempted suicide.
When you were older, I'm sorry.
I don't remember having any kind of mental health services or any kind of referrals at initially, even at that time, therapy, nothing. Even though I went through a traumatic experience and could even now remember my mom's body on the floor, and then her body on the stretcher being carried into the ambulance. I had nightmares. I told my grandparents. I believe my grandparents told the CPS workers there was no services offered. Eventually, my behavior spiraled out of control to 7.5 years old. My grandparents then was faced with the choice of placing me in a child crisis center because out of nowhere I just start just being defiant
Acting
and
out, right?
acting out. So I would say my first contact was 7.5, but it wasn't through a foster care referral or a welfare department referral. It was through my grandparents actively seeking treatment because they seen something was wrong with me. Like I said, and even within that time, foster care still had contact with me. They would come to the house and do checkups. They would see issues wrong with me. My grandparents would report it, and there was no services offered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm grateful.
I was first in care at 4 because of abuse and neglect from my parents. I was in foster care from 4 to 8. I went back with my parents between 8 and 12. It wasn't until I was hospitalized at 14 that I received any kind of care and wasn't in the foster care system. And then after that, when I couldn't go back with my sister, I ended up in a group home, and they had doctors there, so I saw everything at the group home. I didn't have any outside mental health services. It was everything was at the group home.
I think that's the area that really we want to be able to focus, and be the last item I asked you to comment on is that, particularly over the last decade, we've seen an over-reliance on prescriptions for psychotropic medication within youth who are in group homes in particular. I'd like, if you won't mind, and again, I cannot thank the two of you enough for coming up here, taking the time, and telling your story. We're grateful. How many other youth, when you're, for example, at a group home, were being prescribed psychotropic medication? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, a lot of youth. I remember I was at a Lincoln Child Center in Oakland, which is, I would say, overall, an okay group home, a pretty good group home. However, I can't say names on, so there was another youth, two youth. This one youth used to take medications, and after he took the medications, used to bang his head on the wall for hours. When he didn't take the medications, he would not bang his head on the wall for hours, but his behavior would be more defiant. He would get in more arguments with the staff. So as a result of his defiant behaviors, they would medicate him, even though it caused self-harmful behaviors. There's another youth that I remember pretty vividly, a Caucasian youth. He was on so many different medications at one time that you could barely talk to him without, like, him stuttering, or without him losing track of what was being said. Sometimes he would, like, you could physically see him drool on himself. He wouldn't sleep. He would be like almost like what's the word? Like when you're not really in touch with reality. Sometimes as a result of the meds. And I know it was as a result of the meds, because when he didn't take the meds at certain times, when I would sit down and talk to him, he would be a perfectly normal kid. And then when he takes them, it's over. I've seen other people who, they were normal at first, and then after, 3 or 4 months of taking the medication, they completely change their behavior, and like they're even now when I run into them on the streets now, they're still dependent on those medications. They're off mentally still to this day. So yeah, I mean, there's so many youth, and I was surrounded by so many youth that's similar to us. We're actually pretty lucky.
Thank you so much. Please.
At the group home I was at, it was a level 10, and there was about 6 homes in the group home altogether. Each home had 6 kids. Basically, every kid had at least one medication taking. There was a few like me were taking multiple, between 4 to 6 different medications. There was this one girl who I was in the group home with. She was taking 6 medications, 6 different. I was taking 4 different, but that had me taking 12 pills a day. I don't know how many she was, probably around 20 pills a day. And she would walk around like she was a baby. She would want to drink out of a bottle, want a pacifier, have baby talk. Her capacity of thinking was not there anymore. There was another kid constantly going withdrawals from Ritalin and Concerta, because the medicine was always on tar, so she was always feeling like she was on drugs, coming off of them, like a meth addict, because she was on so many medications that her medications would go on tar all the time. There was kids that only 10 years old taking 5 different psychotropic medications, still acting out, and the medication is not even helping them at all.
Thank you. Thank you both for sticking your neck out today, and your willingness to be able to tell the story, and your commitment to be able to reform the system. Really grateful. Tisha, D'Angelo, you were fantastic. And I hope that you're going to be able to hang here for the remainder of the hearing. And we're just grateful for your participation and now for your amazing work to be able to bring reform. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Both of you did a fantastic job.